Shalom, this is Rabbi Mark Hillel Kunis and my taste of Torah for Parshat Yitro 5781. Let me share with you some Torah from my mentor Rabbi Benjamin Blech. In this week's Torah portion we have the giving of the 10 Dibrot, often called the 10 Commandments, and the giving of the Torah in the desert of Sinai. It's the culmination of a narrative beginning with Abraham of how we became God's people. The drama of the Mount Sinai experience must have been incredible, with God speaking to the entire Jewish people amidst thunder and lightning and the sound of the shofar. 2 questions. Number 1, why was the Torah given in the desert and not in the land of Israel, the promised land? The answer is the Torah is meant not just for the Jewish people. And so it wasn't given in the United States or Rome or China. It was given in a desert, because a desert is no man's land, which is another way of saying it is every man's land. Question number 2. Who is this Parsha with the giving of the Torah named after? It's amazing. It should have been Moses, but it wasn't. It's Yitro. What's the uniqueness of Yitro? Yitro was a non-Jew who converted. By naming the Parsha after him, we are saying that God's Torah is meant not just for the Jews, but for the entire world. Yitro is a wonderful illustration of someone who saw the light, came to the Jewish people, and accepted God's Torah. I can't speak now about all the 10 Commandments. Let me just focus on a famous passage that is often misunderstood, a passage that is repeated as part of God's attributes of mercy a few times in the Torah. The second commandment begins, "You shall not have any other gods before me. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I am Hashem, your God." And here's the passage. Poked avon avot al banim al shleshim ve'al rebeim. The usual translation is, "For I am Hashem, your God, who visits the sin of the father upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generations." This seems to say that if you commit a sin, God will get you and your kids and their children even until the 3rd and 4th generations. It sounds a lot like a concept of in Christianity of original sin. I remember as a child in Brooklyn, more than once walking through a non-Jewish neighborhood with my kippah on and being yelled at, "Christ killer, Christ killer." What were they saying? That Jews of all generations are guilty for killing Jesus. We didn't kill Jesus. And the Torah is emphatic. Fathers shall not be put to death because of their sons, and sons shall not be put to death because of their fathers. Ish b'chet'o yumat. A person should be put to death for his own sin. If it is a basic principle that children cannot be punished for the sins of the parents, so how does Judaism understand and translate this phrase? There are several explanations, and I will share more of them with you in a few weeks when this passage is repeated as part of God's attributes of mercy. But for now, let me share with you the approach of Rabbi Shimshon Rifal Hirsch, who shows how this passage demonstrates God's mercy. There is a magnificent principle of words in the Torah. If you want to know what a word really means, look at the very first usage we find it in the Torah. The first time the word poked appears in the Torah is Vashem pakad et Sarah. The clear meaning is, and God remembered Sarah, who was barren, and blessed her with a child. So the words poked avon avot doesn't mean visiting the sins of the fathers, but remembering the sins of the fathers. So if a father was abusive, if a father was evil, if a father didn't model how a person, how a mensch, how a Jew is to behave, If a father didn't give his child a Jewish education, how can that child be expected to follow God's Torah? God must take into account, God must remember the sins of the parents, the way in which the parents brought up the child as he judges the child. That's why this is part of God's attributes of mercy. Why does the Torah say to the third or fourth generations? Because those are the generations of influence. With a parent, which is second generation, or a grandparent, third generation, and a great-grandparent, fourth generation. My friends, what should we take away from this passage? Be extra careful with what we say and what we do with our children and grandchildren. The effects of our behavior can be long-lasting. However, remember, in the end, God is always truly merciful. Have a great Shabbos.